Captain Vex stared at the readings on his screen and felt his stomach turn. After 20 years of exploring the galaxy for the Confederation, he thought he had seen every kind of dangerous planet possible. He was wrong. The planet floating before. Their ship looked beautiful from space. Blue oceans swirled around green and brown continents under white clouds. It seemed peaceful, almost inviting. But the numbers on his scanner told a different story. This world would kill any living thing that tried to land on it. "Dr. Nira, come look at this," Vex called to his science officer. The tall, blue-skinned Alteron woman walked over from her station, her large eyes scanning the data. "These readings cannot be correct," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "The gravity is nearly twice what most species can handle. The atmospheric pressure would crush our bones." Vex nodded grimly. "That's just the beginning. Look at the temperature readings." The planet's surface temperature swung wildly between extremes. In some places, it reached levels that would boil water instantly. In others, it dropped so low that the air itself would freeze solid. And these changes happened quickly, sometimes. Within just a few hours. "The weather patterns are impossible," Nira continued reading. "Storm systems larger than our entire moon, with winds that could tear apart a starship. And look at these ocean readings." The planet's vast oceans were not filled with water as they knew it. The liquid was so acidic it would eat through their ship's hull in minutes. Chemical analysis showed compounds that were deadly poison to every known form of life in the galaxy. "Sir," called out Pilot Ross from his station, "the geological scans are coming in. This planet is shaking apart." The surface readings showed constant earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and shifting ground that never stayed still. Mountain ranges were built and destroyed in cycles that lasted only centuries, not millions of years like on stable worlds. But what made Captain Vex's hands shake as he read the reports was the biological data. The planet was crawling with life, but every single creature seemed designed to kill. Massive beasts with armor thicker than battle tanks roamed the land. Flying creatures with razor-sharp claws filled the skies. Even the plants were deadly, with some that could move fast enough to catch and eat large animals. "Captain," Nira whispered, "these microbe readings show bacteria that can eat through almost any material we know. Our environmental suits would last maybe an hour before they failed." The more they studied the planet, the more impossible it seemed. This world broke every rule of what planets could support life. It was too hot, too cold, too violent, too poisonous, and too dangerous for anything to survive. Yet their scanners showed millions of different life forms, all seemingly thriving in conditions that should have killed them instantly. Vex had seen many dangerous worlds. There were ice planets where the cold could freeze blood in seconds. Desert worlds where the heat would cook flesh off bones. Gas giants where the pressure would flatten anything solid. Ocean worlds where the depths crushed submarines like paper. But none of those came close to this nightmare. "What do we call a place like this?" asked Ross, staring at the planet with wide eyes. "A death world," Vex said quietly. "The worst death world ever discovered." He began typing his official report, the document that would be sent to every world in the Confederation. His fingers moved slowly as he tried to find words for what they had found. "Planet designation K743 represents the most hostile environment ever recorded in galactic survey history," he wrote. "Surface conditions include extreme gravity fluctuation, toxic atmospheric composition, violent weather systems, constant seismic activity, and aggressive biological hazards at every level from microscopic to megafauna." He paused, thinking about how to explain just how dangerous this world really was. Every other death world they had found had at least some safe zones, some places where careful explorers could land and survive for a while with proper equipment. This planet had none. Atmospheric analysis shows air composition that would cause immediate respiratory failure in 73% of known species, he continued. Chemical compounds in the air and water would cause tissue damage within minutes of exposure. Weather patterns include storm systems with wind speeds exceeding the structural limits of all known spacecraft designs. The geological data made things even worse. Surface instability makes long-term settlement impossible, Vex typed. Volcanic activity, earthquakes, and continental drift occur at rates thousands of times faster than galactic norms. Any structures built on the surface would be destroyed within local years, if not months. But the biological hazards were what really terrified him. Native life forms show aggressive predatory behavior at every level of the food chain. No safe ecosystem zones identified. Plant life includes species capable of rapid movement and active hunting behavior. Animal life includes creatures with natural armor exceeding military-grade protection specifications, venom systems that could kill most known species instantly, and pack hunting behaviors that suggest high intelligence. Even the microscopic life was deadly. Bacterial and viral organisms show resistance to all known sterilization methods. Several species of microbes appear capable of consuming metals, plastics, and organic compounds that form the basis of most technology and equipment. Vex sat back and read over what he had written. It sounded like something from a horror story, not a real planet. But every word was supported by mountains of scanner data. Recommendation, he wrote in the final section. Planet K743 should be classified as Deathworld Class X and placed under permanent quarantine. No known species possesses the biological adaptations necessary to survive planetfall. Landing attempts would result in certain death within hours, regardless of protective equipment used. This world should be marked as completely unsuitable for any form of exploration, research, or colonization. He sent the report through the ship's communication array, knowing it would reach Confederation headquarters in a few days. Soon, warnings about K743 would spread to every civilized world in the galaxy. Dr. Nira was still studying the biological scans when she looked up at him. Captain, I have been thinking about this planet. How is it possible for so many deadly creatures to exist in one place? What do they eat? How do they reproduce? How does any ecosystem function when everything is trying to kill everything else? Vex shook his head. I don't know, Doctor. Maybe some questions are better left unanswered. Some places in the universe are just not meant for civilized life. As their ship turned away from the deadly world, Captain Vex made one final log entry. Survey of planet K743 complete. Classification: Deathworld Class X. Threat level: absolute. Survival probability for any known species: 0. He had no idea that in just a few years, his report would become the most famous document in galactic history, not for its warnings about danger, but for how completely wrong it would turn out to be. 3 years had passed since Captain Vex filed his report about the Deathworld, K743. The planet had become famous throughout the galaxy as the most dangerous place ever discovered. Scientists used it in their lectures as an example of how hostile a world could be. Military academies taught courses about it to show soldiers what true danger looked like. Children heard stories about the nightmare planet where nothing could survive. Commander Tog had heard all these stories. The gray-skinned Confederation Navy officer had served on dozens of ships and visited hundreds of worlds, but he had never seen K743 himself. That changed when his long-range sensors picked up something impossible. Sir, we're getting readings from the K743 system, reported his communications officer, a young woman named Beth. There are energy signatures coming from the planets. Surface. Tog looked up from his reports. That's impossible. Nothing lives on that world. Check your equipment. Beth ran the scans again, her face growing more confused. Sir, the readings are getting stronger. These aren't natural energy patterns. They look like technology signatures. Show me, Tog ordered, walking over to the main display screen. Image that appeared made no sense. The deadly planet that had terrified the galaxy's best scientists was showing clear signs of artificial energy production. Not just small amounts either, but massive power signatures spread across multiple continents. This has to be wreckage from some crashed ship, Tog said, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Maybe a vessel got pulled down by the gravity and their reactor is still running. But as they got closer to the planet, the readings became even more confusing. The energy signatures weren't random or scattered like wreckage would be. They were organized, forming patterns that looked like cities, transportation networks, and industrial complexes. "Commander," called out his scanner operator, "I'm detecting what appears to be orbital traffic around the planet." "That's not possible," Tog said firmly. "No species in the galaxy can survive on that world." But the evidence kept building. Their sensors showed spacecraft moving between the planet's surface and orbit. These weren't Confederation ships or any design they recognized. The vessels looked simple, almost primitive, but they were clearly functional and operating in conditions that should have destroyed any known technology. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," Beth announced, her voice shaking with disbelief. "It's coming from the planet's surface." "Put it through," Tog ordered. The voice that came through their speakers was clear and friendly. It spoke in a language none of them had heard before, but their translation computers quickly began working on it. "Unknown vessel. This is Earth Colonial Station on New Terra. Welcome to our system. Are you here for trade or diplomatic contact? We'd be happy to help with whatever you need." The bridge fell silent. Earth Colonial Station, New Terra? Someone was not only living on the Deathworld, they had renamed it and were treating it like a normal planet. "This is Commander Tog of the Confederation Navy," he replied carefully. "We received energy readings from your planet and came to investigate. We were not aware that anyone had settled on this world." The response came back quickly, and the translation was now working perfectly. "Oh, you must be talking about the old survey reports. Yes, we saw those when we first arrived. Pretty funny stuff. The survey team seemed to think this place was dangerous." Tog felt his mouth fall open. Funny? The most terrifying planet in known space was funny to these people? "May we ask what species you represent?" Tog asked. "Our records show no civilization capable of surviving on your planet's surface." "We're humans," came the reply. "We've been here about 2 years now. Started with just a few hundred colonists, but we're up to about 50,000 now. Growing fast." Dr. Wells, the ship's science officer, grabbed Tog's arm. "Commander, this is impossible. The atmospheric readings alone should kill any carbon-based life form in minutes. The gravity would crush most species. The weather patterns would destroy any structures they tried to build." But the evidence was right in front of them. The planet's surface was covered with what looked like thriving settlements. Their scanners showed agriculture, mining operations, and what appeared to be recreational facilities. "Would you like to visit?" the human voice asked. "We don't get many visitors out here. We could set up a meeting facility that would keep you safe from our environment." Safe from their environment? These humans were offering to protect Confederation visitors from a planet they considered normal. That would be appreciated, Tog managed to say. "We would very much like to learn how you have achieved what our scientists believed impossible." Over the next few hours, they watched in amazement as the humans constructed what they called a visitor habitat on the planet's surface. The structure looked simple compared to Confederation technology, but it was clearly designed to create a livable environment for species that couldn't handle the planet's natural conditions. When the habitat was ready, Tog led a small team down to the surface in their most heavily protected shuttle. Even with full environmental suits and emergency equipment, he felt terrified as they descended through the planet's atmosphere. The landing went smoothly, which surprised him. Their shuttle touched down on a flat area near the visitor habitat, and human workers guided them safely inside. When the airlock sealed and the atmosphere adjusted to Confederation standards, Tog finally felt like he could breathe again. The human who greeted them looked completely normal. She was tall and thin, with brown hair and friendly eyes. She wore simple clothes and seemed perfectly comfortable, even though she was living on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. "Welcome to New Terra," she said with a smile. "I'm Ambassador Reed. Thank you for making the trip down here. I know it must seem pretty scary to outsiders." "Scary?" Dr. Wells stammered. "Your planet is classified as completely uninhabitable." "How are you even alive?" Reed laughed. "Oh, that old survey report. We read it when we first arrived. The team did a good job documenting the local conditions, but they seemed to think normal weather was some kind of deadly threat." "Normal weather?" Tog asked. "Your storms have wind speeds that can destroy starships." "Well, yes, during storm season we do get some pretty strong winds," Reed admitted. "Nothing too serious, though. We just build our structures to handle it. Where we come from, we called it hurricane season." Through the habitat's windows, they could see human workers moving around outside without any protective equipment. They were building new structures, tending to plants, and doing normal work while exposed to conditions that would kill most galactic species in seconds. "Your homeworld," Dr. Wells asked quietly, "what is it like?" Reed's expression grew thoughtful. "Earth? Well, it's a bit more challenging than this place, actually. Higher gravity, more volatile weather, and the wildlife is pretty aggressive. This planet is actually quite pleasant by comparison. That's why we chose it for our first major colony." Tog felt the universe shift around him. These humans came from a world that was worse than K743. They looked at the galaxy's most feared, Deathworld, and thought it was a nice place to raise families. "We would very much like to establish formal diplomatic relations with your people," he said carefully. "The Confederation would be honored to welcome humanity as members." "That sounds wonderful," Reed replied. "We're always happy to meet new friends. Though I should warn you, we're planning to expand to several more worlds in this region. I hope that won't be a problem." "More worlds?" Tog asked. "Oh yes, we found 3 other planets nearby that look perfect for human settlement." "Your survey." Teams classified them as Deathworlds too, but they look like lovely places to us. As Tog's team prepared to return to their ship, he realized that everything they thought they knew about what was possible in the universe had just changed. Humanity didn't just survive on Deathworlds. They preferred them. The news of humanity's existence spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Within weeks, every major world in the Confederation was talking about the impossible species that lived on Deathworlds. Scientists demanded to study them. Politicians wanted to meet them. Military leaders wondered what other surprises these humans might have. Ambassador Reed found herself at the center of the galaxy's attention. The Confederation Council invited her to their capital world for formal diplomatic talks. It would be the first time in galactic history that someone from a Deathworld would visit a civilized planet. The journey to the Confederation capital required special arrangements. Reed needed a ship that could transport her safely, but more importantly, she needed to survive in what humans called a soft environment. The low gravity, mild temperature, and gentle atmosphere of civilized worlds could be just as dangerous to humans as Deathworlds were to other species. When Reed's ship arrived at the capital, thousands of beings gathered to see her. They expected to meet some kind of monster, a creature that looked as dangerous as the world she came from. Instead, they saw a normal-looking woman who seemed friendly and curious about everything around her. The first formal meeting took place in the council chamber, the most important room in Confederation space. Leaders from dozens of species sat in their comfortable chairs, studying the human ambassador with fascination and fear. "Ambassador Reed, began Chancellor Lars, the head of the Confederation Council. "We are honored by your presence here. We must admit, your people have achieved something we thought impossible." "Thank you, Chancellor," Reed replied with a smile. "We're excited to meet all of you too. We've been alone in space for so long, we started to wonder if anyone else was out there." "Alone?" asked Dr. Kim, the Council's chief scientist. "How long has your species been traveling in space?" "Oh, not very long by galactic standards," Reed said. "We've only been exploring outside our home system for about 50 years now. We're still pretty new to all this." The Council members looked at each other in shock. Most species took thousands of years to develop the technology needed for interstellar travel, and even then, they stayed close to safe, habitable worlds. Humans had gone from first spaceflight to colonizing Deathworlds in just 50 years. "Your homeworld," Chancellor Lars asked carefully, "what conditions did your species evolve in?" Reed thought for a moment. "Well, Earth has pretty standard conditions, I suppose. The gravity is a bit higher than most planets we've visited. The weather changes a lot, sometimes very quickly. We have seasonal storms, earthquakes, volcanoes, that sort of thing. The wildlife is fairly active." "Active?" Dr. Kim asked. "Well, most of our large animals, our predators, are very territorial. We had to learn to defend ourselves from a young age. But that's normal, right? Every species must have similar challenges." The silence in the chamber was deafening. Most species evolved on worlds where the biggest danger was finding enough food or avoiding mild weather changes. The idea of growing up surrounded by deadly predators was terrifying to them. "Ambassador," said General Ross, the military representative, "our records show that your people have not just survived on K743, but have actually improved the planet." "How is this possible?" Reed's face lit up. "Oh, that's been our favorite project. The planet had so much potential, but it wasn't being used efficiently. We've been working with the local ecosystem to make it more productive." "Working with it?" Dr. Kim asked, confused. "Sure, the native predators make excellent working animals once you earn their trust. They're strong, intelligent, and perfectly adapted to the local conditions. We've trained several species to help with construction and transportation." The Council members stared at her. The survey reports had described creatures so dangerous that approaching them would mean certain death. Reed was talking about them like farm animals. "The weather patterns were another great resource," Reed continued. "Those big storms generate incredible amounts of energy. We've built collection systems that can power our entire colony network, using just the regular storm cycles." "You use the storms for power?" Chancellor Lars asked weakly. "Of course, it would be wasteful not to. The electrical activity during storm season can power our cities for months. And the high winds are perfect for certain types of manufacturing processes." Reed pulled out a small device and showed it to the Council. "This is made from materials we mine during volcanic eruptions. The heat and pressure create crystals with properties we never found on Earth. Very useful for our technology." "You mine during volcanic eruptions?" General Ross asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Well, that's when the best materials are available," Reed explained. "It's a bit warm, but nothing too difficult if you have the right equipment." Dr. Kim was taking notes frantically. "What do you consider the most dangerous aspect of your new world?" Reed thought seriously about the question. "Probably the seasonal migrations of the large sea creatures. They can damage our underwater facilities if we're not careful about the timing. But we've learned to work around their schedules." The Council had read the reports about K743's oceans. The water was so acidic it could eat through starship hulls, and the sea creatures were described as monsters the size of buildings. Reed was talking about scheduling around them like they were weather patterns. "Your agricultural systems," Dr. Kim continued. "How do you grow food in such conditions?" "The soil is incredibly rich," Reed said enthusiastically. All that volcanic activity creates perfect growing conditions. And the native plant species are amazing once you learn to work with them. Some of them actually help protect our crops from the more aggressive local wildlife. The plants are aggressive? Chancellor Lars asked. Some of them, yes. But they're not really dangerous once you understand their behavior patterns. We've actually been able to domesticate several species. They make excellent natural security systems. The more Reed talked, the more impossible it all seemed. Humans hadn't just survived on the galaxy's most dangerous world. They had turned every deadly feature into an advantage. The storms provided power. The predators became workers. The hostile plant life became security guards. The deadly oceans became transportation routes. Ambassador Reed, General Ross said slowly, "Are there other human colonies besides New Terra?" "Oh yes," Reed replied happily. "We've established settlements on 8 worlds now, with more planned. Each one has its own unique challenges, which makes them interesting to develop." 8 worlds? Dr. Kim gasped. "Well, 6 are what your surveys classified as Deathworlds," Reed admitted. "The other 2 are what we call easy mode planets. Nice places to retire or raise children who want a more relaxed lifestyle." The council members realized that their entire understanding of what was possible in the universe had changed. These humans had turned the galaxy's most feared environments into vacation destinations. They had made the impossible look easy. "We would very much like to propose a formal alliance between our peoples," Chancellor Lars said. "The Confederation could benefit greatly from your unique ... perspectives." "That sounds wonderful," Reed agreed. "We're always happy to help. Just let us know what you need." As the meeting ended, none of the council members could shake the feeling that they had just met the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because humans were aggressive or violent, but because they made everything else seem fragile by comparison. The emergency alert reached every Confederation world at the same time. The message was simple but terrifying. The Vorth Empire had declared war and was moving a massive invasion fleet toward Confederation space. Chancellor Lars called an emergency session of the Council. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered in panic as reports poured in about the size of the Vorth war machine. The enemy fleet numbered over 3,000 ships, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything the Confederation had ever built. Ambassador Reed attended the emergency meeting, sitting quietly while the galaxy's leaders discussed their options. The mood in the chamber was dark. Everyone knew the Confederation's reputation for peace had made them weak in military matters. Their ships were designed for exploration and trade, not war. "The Vorth have never been defeated," General Ross reported grimly. "Every species they have attacked has either surrendered or been completely destroyed. Their military technology is centuries ahead of ours. How long do we have?" asked Chancellor Lars. "Their fleet will reach our outer worlds in 6 weeks," the general replied. "Our defense forces are already retreating from the border systems. We cannot stop them in open battle." Dr. Kim stood up, her voice shaking. "Perhaps we should consider surrender. The Vorth usually allow defeated species to exist as slave worlds. It would be better than extinction." A murmur of agreement went through the chamber. Many species had faced the same choice over the centuries. The Vorth Empire had grown by absorbing the territories of defeated enemies. Resistance only led to the complete destruction of entire civilizations. "There is one other option," a quiet voice said from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look at Ambassador Reed, who had been silent throughout the discussion. She stood up slowly, her expression thoughtful. "What option is that?" "Chancellor," Lars asked. "An alliance with humanity," Reed said simply. "We could help you fight the Vorth." The chamber fell silent for a moment, then several council members began talking at once. The idea seemed absurd. Humanity had fewer than 100 ships, all of them built with simple technology that looked primitive compared to Confederation. Standards. Ambassador Reed, General Ross said carefully, we appreciate the offer, but the Vorth have 3,000 warships. Your entire fleet would be destroyed in the first battle. Reed smiled. That depends on where the battle takes place. What do you mean? Dr. Kim asked. The Vorth are used to fighting in space, around normal planets with standard conditions. Reed explained. But what if we chose the battlefield? What if we made them come to us on worlds where we have advantages? Captain Price, humanity's military representative, had arrived during the discussion. He was a tall, serious man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had fought in several wars on Earth before joining the colonial fleet. The Confederation has many worlds, Price said, but most of them are soft targets. Easy to invade, difficult to defend. However, there are other worlds in your territory that the Vorth would find much more challenging. What worlds? General Ross asked. Deathworlds, Price replied. Planets that your people cannot live on, but that humans find quite comfortable. The council members looked at each other with growing understanding. The Confederation controlled dozens of systems with planets that had been surveyed and marked as uninhabitable. Worlds with crushing gravity, poisonous atmospheres, violent weather, and deadly wildlife. Places where no civilized species would ever choose to fight a battle. You're suggesting we evacuate our people from the threatened worlds and make our stand on planets where most species cannot survive, Chancellor Lars said slowly. Exactly, Reed agreed. The Vorth are powerful because they have superior technology and tactics designed for normal combat conditions. But what happens when their equipment fails in extreme environments? What happens when their soldiers cannot breathe the air or survive the gravity? Captain Price activated a small projector, showing a map of the threatened region. We have identified 3 Deathworld systems along the Vorth advance route. If we can evacuate the civilian populations from the target worlds and establish defensive positions on these planets, we can force the Vorth to fight on our terms. But how would our own forces survive on such worlds? General Ross asked. They wouldn't, Price said bluntly. This would be a human-led defense. Confederation forces would provide space support and logistics from orbit, while human ground forces handle the surface battles. The idea was unlike anything ever attempted in galactic warfare. Most military strategy focused on protecting valuable, habitable worlds. The concept of abandoning normal planets to fight on uninhabitable ones seemed like madness. The Vorth military doctrine is based on overwhelming technological superiority, Captain Price continued. They expect enemies to meet them in conventional space battles where their advanced weapons and shields provide decisive advantages. They have never fought an enemy that uses environmental conditions as weapons. Dr. Kim was studying the tactical display. What you're describing would require enormous sacrifices. Entire civilizations would have to abandon their homeworlds. Yes, Reed said quietly, but they would survive. The alternative is complete extinction when the Vorth arrive. Chancellor Lars looked around the chamber at the faces of his fellow leaders. Fear was written on every face, but also a growing sense of hope. For the first time since the Vorth invasion began, someone was offering a plan that might actually work. What would you need from us? He asked. Captain Price smiled grimly. Transport ships to evacuate civilians from the target worlds, supply lines to keep our forces equipped, and trust that we know how to fight on worlds that would kill most species. The first battle site would be Kepler's Hell, Reed added. Your surveys classified it as Class X uninhabitable, with surface temperatures that fluctuate between freezing and boiling, constant acid rain, and seismic activity that never stops. That sounds like suicide, General Ross muttered. For the Vorth, yes, Price agreed. For humans, it's just another Tuesday. The vote was close, but the council agreed to the plan. Over the following weeks, the largest evacuation in galactic history began. Millions of beings fled from worlds in the path of the Vorth advance, while human forces moved into position on planets that had never seen civilized life. The Confederation fleet would wait in space, ready to support the human defenders, but unable to land on the hostile worlds. Everything depended on whether these strange beings from the Deathworlds could do what they claimed. As the evacuation continued, reports came in about the approaching Vorth fleet. Their ships moved through space with confidence, expecting to find the usual pattern of terrified civilians and weak defenders. They had no idea they were flying toward a trap designed by the galaxy's most dangerous species. Captain Price stood on the bridge of the human command ship, watching the hostile planet of Kepler's hell rotate below. The surface storms were particularly violent today, with lightning that could be seen from orbit and winds that would tear apart most buildings. "Perfect weather for a battle," he said to his officers. "The Vorth are going to learn what happens when Deathworld natives get angry." The Vorth invasion fleet arrived at Kepler's hell with the confidence of 1,000 victories. Admiral Krex had conquered 47 star systems for the Empire, and every battle had followed the same pattern. The enemy would meet them in space with their best ships and technology. The Vorth would destroy them with superior firepower. Then they would land on the defeated world and claim it for the Empire. But something was wrong this time. The Confederation fleet was nowhere to be seen. Instead of defending their valuable planets, they had retreated to orbit around a world that Vorth scanners marked as completely uninhabitable. The planet below was a nightmare of storms, acid rain, crushing gravity, and surface temperatures that swung between deadly extremes. "Why are they protecting the dead world?" asked Commander Zrak, staring at the tactical display. "It doesn't matter," Admiral Krex replied. "If they want to make their last stand around a worthless planet, we will destroy them there." The Vorth fleet moved into attack formation, expecting the Confederation ships to engage them in traditional space combat. Instead, the enemy vessels stayed in high orbit, making no move to fight. Long-range scans showed defensive positions on the planet's surface, but that made no sense. No species could survive down there long enough to build fortifications. "Admiral," reported the scanning officer, "we're detecting energy signatures from the planet's surface. It appears the enemy has established military installations in several locations." Krex studied the readings with growing confusion. The surface installations were small and simple compared to normal military bases, but they were clearly functional. Somehow, the Confederation had managed to put troops on a world where they should have died instantly. "Prepare for orbital bombardment," Krex ordered. "We'll destroy their surface positions from space, then deal with their fleet." The Vorth ships opened fire on the planet below, sending streams of energy that should have vaporized any enemy positions. But the weapons' fire seemed to have little effect. The strange storms that covered the planet scattered the energy beams, and the extreme atmospheric conditions reduced their power dramatically. "Sir, the orbital bombardment is not effective," the weapons officer reported. "The planet's environment is interfering with our targeting systems." This was something Admiral Krex had never encountered before. Vorth technology was designed to work perfectly in any normal environment. But Kepler's hell was not normal. The electromagnetic storms, the crushing atmospheric pressure, and the violent weather created conditions that no engineer had ever planned for. "Send down landing forces," Krex ordered. "We'll take their positions by ground assault." The first wave of Vorth troops descended toward the planet in heavily armored transports. These elite soldiers had conquered worlds across the galaxy, equipped with the finest weapons and protection the Empire could provide. They were confident that whatever enemy awaited them on the surface would fall quickly. The transports barely made it through the planet's violent atmosphere. The storms that raged across Kepler's hell tossed the heavily armored ships around like toys. Several crashed before reaching the landing zones, and the ones that survived came down far from their intended targets. Lieutenant Davis watched the Vorth ship struggle through the storm from his position on a rocky ridge. The human soldier was dressed in simple combat gear that looked primitive compared to the enemy's advanced equipment. But he was breathing the planet's toxic atmosphere without any protection, standing in gravity that would crush most species and completely comfortable in conditions that were killing Vorth soldiers before they even got out of their ships. "First wave incoming," Davis reported into his radio. "Looks like they're having trouble with the weather." Captain Price's voice crackled back through the electromagnetic interference. "Copy that. Let them land, then show them how we fight on Deathworld." The Vorth troops that survived the landing found themselves in a nightmare. Their environmental suits struggled to function in the extreme conditions. The acidic atmosphere ate at their equipment. The constant earthquakes made it impossible to establish stable positions. And worst of all, they could barely move in the crushing gravity that seemed normal to their enemies. The first engagement came when a squad of Vorth soldiers encountered human defenders near a sulfur mining operation. The Vorth expected to face enemy troops struggling with the same environmental challenges they were experiencing. Instead, they found humans moving across the hostile terrain like it was their natural habitat. Davis led his squad through a maze of volcanic vents and acid pools, using the planet's dangerous features for concealment and tactical advantage. The toxic fumes that forced Vorth troops to rely on filtered air systems had no effect on human soldiers. The unstable ground that made enemy movement clumsy and difficult was familiar territory to troops trained on Deathworlds. The battle was over in minutes. Vorth weapons designed for normal atmospheric conditions misfired in the hostile environment. Their targeting systems failed in the electromagnetic interference from the constant storms. Their heavy armor, meant to protect them from enemy fire, became a burden in the extreme gravity. Meanwhile, human weapons were built simple and sturdy, designed to function in any environment. Human soldiers moved with the practiced ease of people who had grown up on worlds where survival required constant adaptation to hostile conditions. Reports from other landing zones told the same story. Vorth forces were being systematically destroyed by an enemy that treated the deadly environment as an ally. Human troops used volcanic eruptions for cover, acid rain for concealment, and seismic activity to mask their movements. Commander Stone coordinated the space battle from orbit, watching as the famous Vorth fleet struggled with technical failures caused by the planet's extreme conditions. The electromagnetic storms that covered Kepler's hell interfered with Vorth ship systems in ways their engineers had never anticipated. Weapons misfired, shields fluctuated, and navigation systems provided incorrect readings. Human ships, built with simpler but more robust technology, operated normally in conditions that were causing system failures throughout the Vorth fleet. The humans had designed their spacecraft to function in the hostile environments around Deathworld colonies, where equipment failure meant death. The turning point came when Admiral Krex ordered his remaining forces to retreat. The Vorth Empire had never faced an enemy like this before. Humans didn't just survive in impossible conditions, they used those conditions as weapons. Every aspect of Kepler's hell that should have been an advantage for the technologically superior Vorth became a tool in human hands. The retreat became a disaster as Vorth ships tried to escape through the planet's violent storms. Many were destroyed by the same environmental conditions that had protected the human defenders. The survivors fled back to Vorth space with reports that seemed impossible to believe. Within months, similar defeats occurred on other Deathworlds throughout Confederation space. The Vorth Empire, which had seemed unstoppable, found itself unable to fight effectively against an enemy that turned environmental hazards into strategic advantages. The war ended not with a great space battle, but with a treaty signed in the comfortable safety of a Confederation diplomatic station. The Vorth agreed to permanent peace in exchange for the promise that humans would not bring their unique form of warfare to the Empire's peaceful worlds. Captain Vex returned to Kepler's Hell 5 years after the war ended. The planet he had once called the most dangerous in the galaxy now hosted a thriving human city. Children played in parks built around volcanic vents. Families took vacations to watch the acid rainstorms. The nightmare world had become a normal part of human civilization, standing in the safety of an environmental dome. Vex watched human colonists go about their daily lives in conditions that still terrified him. He thought about his original survey report, the one that had called this place uninhabitable and unsuitable for any form of life. He had been wrong about everything except one thing. Kepler's hell really was the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. It just happened that the most dangerous species in the galaxy called it home.